It is a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Mr. Bruce Tulgan of Rainmaker Thinking. Bruce Tulgan is an advisor to business leaders all over the world and a sought-after keynote speaker and seminar leader. He is the founder and CEO of Rainmaker Thinking, Inc., a management research and training firm, as well as RainmakerThinking.Training and online training company. Bruce is the best-selling author of numerous books, including Not Everyone Gets a Trophy, Bridging the Soft Skills Gap, The 27 Challengers Managers Face, and It's Okay to Be the Boss. He has written for the New York Times, the Harvard Business Review, HR Magazine, Trading Magazine, and the Huffington Post. Man, HR, that's the one thing they never taught you in 8 years of dental school. And now all these kids go out, and the next thing you know, they're running a dental office with all these employees with zero training. So do you think it's very wise to do HR with zero training?
Well, look, people move into positions of leadership in organizations of all shapes and sizes in just about every industry. And so often, leaders find themselves in charge of other people, but without any real training in, it's not just HR systems, but it's the basics of leadership communication. There aren't that many organizations that teach that, and it's definitely a missing piece.
Well, to me, I just think humans are the most complicated thing I've ever been exposed to. I mean, they are very, very complicated to figure out, to understand. What insights have you had over your journey about the animal human that allows you to manage it? I mean, they're literally. I mean, what percent of humans do you think are just a little bit on the crazy side?
Well, I'm not a mental health expert, so I would not speculate on that. But we've been doing research on people's experiences in the workplace for 23 years now. And our research is based on in-depth interviews. So more than 300,000 people have participated in our interviews over the last 23 years. And, what we do is we interview people over time. So these are long-term, in-depth interviews. And, what we do is we try to figure out what are the challenges people face in the real workplace, and what are the best ways to handle those challenges. So that's been our mission at Rainmaker Thinking for 23 years, and we have worked with lots of healthcare professionals, but also people in all different industries. And as you point out, the single biggest complicating factor is that they're human beings, and people are funny. People are peculiar.
It is. I mean, it's the greatest thing about life. I mean, being born on Earth with no other humans, I would think that would be kind of a lonely existence. So they're the greatest thing.
It'd be confusing too, because who would explain everything to you?
Yeah. So I mean, it's like live by the sword, die by the sword. They're the greatest thing about life is all the other humans, and it's the most challenging, stressful part of life is all the other humans, all their thoughts, all their beliefs. What do you think are the fundamental things that a manager or a leader or a dentist trying to run an office needs to know about humans and HRs in order to lead the team, manage the team?
Yeah, I mean, look, what I always tell leaders in any industry is, when you're leading people in the workplace, you have to remember that, of course, people are trying to pursue a career. People, especially in healthcare fields, are mission driven. They're driven by the healing mission. And of course, they want to make a contribution. And there's all of that aspect of work and career. But by and large, people work because they have to make a living. And so what I always tell leaders is, step one, you have to remember that work is a transactional relationship. And as a leader, manager, supervisor, what you need is, you need people to do lots of work very well, very fast, all day long with a good attitude. And you're hoping that you can do that at the lowest possible cost. And individuals, employees, what they're trying to do is make a contribution and do a good job, but get as much reward and as much flexibility as they can in the equation. And as a leader, you're kind of stuck in the middle, trying to navigate and negotiate those competing interests. You want to take care of your people. You want to help them earn what they need to take care of themselves and their families. But as a leader, you got to help people do lots of work very well, very fast, all day long. And that's the fundamental challenge. What most leaders do is they err on the side of being too hands off. And, they tell people, hey, figure it out. Do it however you think it should be done. Take a crack at it. And then, when managers, when they really manage is when things are going wrong. So, these are the managers who say, look, I'm not going to tell people what to do. I'm not going to tell them how to do their job. I expect people to know how to do their job. And they know if something goes wrong, then they'll hear from you. The problem with that is then every time they see you coming, it's bad news. We call that bad news managing. And, the trick for leaders and managers is, look, if you're a dentist, that's what you do. So the leadership part is an extra part of your job. It's true if you're an accountant or if you run a store, whatever you do, but the leadership part is really important. And when you don't attend to that as systematically as the other aspects of your work, things will go wrong. So, most leaders, they sort of manage on autopilot until things go wrong. Then they jump into firefighting mode and try to help clean up the problem. Sometimes they're frustrated and there's anger and bad feelings, and then they go back to managing on autopilot. The alternative is to treat the leadership part of your job like all the other professional aspects of your job and attend to them systematically and rigorously every step of the way. And that's what we teach in our management seminars, and that's what works according to our research.
Sometimes you hear that some of the conflicts going on at work is because, like, the manager, me, 54, might be a baby boomer, and I'm not managing just other baby boomers, but they say, Generation X, Generation Y, millennials. Do you think that different leadership styles are necessary for different generations?
Well, I've written several books on that subject, and so the short answer is I think there's a lot to learn about generational difference in the workplace and how it plays out. I mean, look, there's 5 or 6 generations working side by side right now, depending on which demographer you believe. But let's just say, you got the first wave millennials and the second wave millennials. You got the baby boomers. You got Generation X. There's a lot of people in the workplace of different generations. And so, but my view is you don't need 5 different approaches or 6 different approaches, one for each generation. By the way, it's not that simple. In fact, you need as many different approaches as you have people. But if you look through the generational diversity lens, it definitely tells you a lot about the changing workplace and the changing workforce. The baby boomers, Gen Xers, still have some attachment to the old-fashioned workplace of the past. Pay your dues, climb the ladder, do as you're told. Nobody tells you what to do, figure it out and do it anyway. Break a few eggs, sink or swim, kid, reinvent the wheel. In the long run, the system will take care of you. And that's the old-fashioned sink or swim, figure it out, in the long run, the system will take care of you. That's the old dues-paying model. But, people of all ages are thinking less and less that way. The second wave millennials, the 20-somethings who are coming into the workplace today, to them, that sounds like you're trying to sell them a bridge. You're going to tell me what you have for me in 5 years, and I'm supposed to make a bunch of short-term sacrifices? No, thanks. Why don't you tell me what you have for me today, tomorrow, and this week? No hard feelings. So, I think we're seeing a fundamental change in the mindset of the workforce among people of all ages. But if you look at the youngest, least experienced people, you see they think short-term and transactional about work. They're trying to build a career they can wrap around the kind of life they want to have. They're not willing to make sacrifices, as many sacrifices at least, when it comes to their lifestyle, their schedule, the geographical location where they're willing to work. They'll make investments in their future, but they're calibrating their career investments in a much more short-term and transactional way. And what this seems like to older, more experienced people is like young people are high maintenance. Like you say, welcome aboard, and they say, oh, well, hey, listen, I don't think I can work on Thursdays. And you say, hey, let me sit you down and show you how to do this. And they say, oh, and by the way, yeah, that's not how I think it should be done. I just looked on my handheld supercomputer and I think it should be done this way. And right. And so this is some of the generational shift that's going on in the workforce today. And we've been tracking that for 23 years.
When I was in school in the 80s, most people considered it a male profession. Most of the dentists were males. Now the dental schools are 50% female. Do you think that women dentists will have different challenges managing dental offices? Because dental offices traditionally are 95% women. So my question is, do you think the new women dentists will have different challenges managing an industry that's pretty much female employees versus the old school where it was men going in there managing women? Do men have different challenges managing women than women managing women?
Well, I'm not an expert on gender difference in the workplace. That's not my area of expertise. But I will say that I think any leader of any age or either gender or any gender, I guess gender is more complicated than just the binary, it turns out. But any leader of any shape and size is susceptible to practicing false empowerment. In other words, thinking that the way to empower people is to just leave them alone. Whereas my view is real empowerment takes very hard work. All managers are susceptible to false fairness, which is, thinking that the way to be fair is to treat everybody exactly the same. Whereas my view is the way to be fair is to reward people differently based on what they need and based on their contributions. Do more for some and less for others based on what they deserve. I think that's what's fair. I think all managers are susceptible to slipping into what I call, the myth of the jerk boss, that if you're strong and hold people accountable, your employees will think you're a jerk. Whereas I think most employees, if they have a weak boss, that's who they think is a jerk. What most leaders, who are weak are the ones who employees don't like. Most employees don't want a weak leader. They want a strong leader. So, I think these are the weaknesses these are the vulnerabilities that any leader can slip into. Fear of conflict. Men and women alike, as leaders, sometimes because of their fear of conflict, they don't deal with small problems while they're still small. And as a result, sometimes small problems turn into bigger problems. Men and women alike are susceptible to not documenting performance sufficiently, not spelling out expectations sufficiently, not holding people accountable. So I think men and women alike are susceptible to these weaknesses, and managers of either gender or any gender, all managers, what they need to do is commit to a rigorous, systematic approach to leadership communication, spell out expectations every step of the way, keep score every step of the way, push rewards toward people when they earn them, and hold people accountable when they don't deliver on their commitments.
Sometimes you read all these things about like Steve Jobs, these great one-liners that he was just a great leader. But then you read the biographies and you go see the two different movies on him, and he was an incredibly, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of a mean guy. I mean, screamed and yelled and mean. But look at the results he had. Another confusing one was Bobby Knight from Indiana. I mean, he was one of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time, but he was always screaming and yelling and throwing chairs out out on the floor and all that stuff. How do you reconcile some of the views on leadership? I mean, you got crazy people like Steve Jobs and Bobby Knight who are crushing it, but I'm just, that doesn't fly in our world today.
Well, I'll say two things about that. One is that I think leaders who are bullies, leaders who don't hold themselves to a high standard when it comes to their temper, leaders who use abusive language. I guess there are plenty of cases where, due to their power and their ability to provide rewards of other types, they're still able to attract great talent sometimes. And my guess is, then their great talent does a lot of boss managing, and that in many cases those leaders succeed, at least in part, despite their lack of self-control, discipline, structure, and rigor. And I also suspect that there's plenty of self-control, discipline, structure, and rigor that we don't see, that happens in their quieter moments. But my view is there's nothing strong about having a tantrum. That's just loud, nasty weakness. And that, there's also, there's some people who have what I call the gift of natural leadership. Now, is that 1 out of 100 leaders, maybe 1 out of 1,000? There are some leaders who they just have this infectious enthusiasm. They have an ability to project their vision and to light the fire in other people's bellies. I think it's extremely rare. I don't think it can be learned. And so it's not a very good example for most people. I mean, I'm in the business of teaching leaders how to set people up for success, how to eliminate unnecessary problems, solve problems more quickly, improve productivity and quality, help people manage their attitudes at work, and help leaders basically get more work and better work out of every person and help people get more rewards. So, I'm aiming more at the 99% of leaders who, their best bet is to learn the basics and practice the basics systematically.
Podcasting is pretty much more millennials. I mean, grandpas like me aren't really podcasting. It seems like it's mostly 30 and under. These shows are an hour long because that's what they wanted. That's what they told me is their commute to work. So she's driving to work. She's listening to you, and I'm trying to guess her questions, but she's probably thinking, okay, for 8 years I studied math, geometry, physics, calculus, all this stuff. Like, what book should she read that you recommend to be a greater leader, to be better at HR? I know you've written several best-selling books. Not Everyone Gets a Trophy, Bridging the Soft Skills. Tell her what you would recommend that she didn't get in dental school.
Well, Bridging the Soft Skills Gap and Not Everyone Gets a Trophy, the two books you just mentioned of mine, those are very specifically about managing millennials. So, those are my best effort at capturing our research on bringing out the best in today's.
Do you think millennials will be the last generation because they're too lazy to have children?
Well, golly, I think that would be a prediction that is not likely to
That was
out.
I was reading a chart, and STDs have been really plummeting in America. I mean, they're really dropping, and I always say it's because millennials are too lazy. Um, but so
Again,
which
I'm not a healthcare professional myself.
so
Technically I'm trained as a lawyer, but
that's right. You are a lawyer. Go through each one of your books and try to and give your best pitch on your book to her so she can decide if that's something. Now, are all these books on Amazon too, or do you go to
yeah, or
Rainmaker?
my friends at Barnes and Noble would be very frustrated if I didn't say they were there too, and wherever books are sold.
But you know what's funny is people over 50 are the only ones watching TV and reading books. I heard Bezos saying that the millennials buy more audiobooks. Or
Well, and of course they're available in that format. And if you go to our website, RainmakerThinking.com, what we do there is we publish lots of articles and radio interviews and podcasts and videos, and that stuff is always on our website. And it's to your point, it's because that kind of information seems to be what a lot of people prefer: short articles, short interviews, short videos. So we have a lot of free information at our website, but my publishers would prefer that you buy the book, of course. And not everyone gets a trophy. Is my book about bringing out the best in young talent in the millennials. Bridging the soft skills gap is a little more of a focused book. It's based on our research on what a lot of managers say, that young people lack professionalism today. That they don't have the old-fashioned work habits. They don't have as good interpersonal skills. That they don't have the same kind of critical thinking and problem-solving skills. That they don't know how to practice old-fashioned followership and take a service mindset and sacrifice for the team and all that. So bridging the soft skills gap is really about how managers can teach those old-fashioned basics to young people. But I have two books that are sort of back to basics management books for any manager of any age. One of them is called "It's Okay to Be the Boss," and that's about it's a step-by-step guide to getting back to the fundamentals of management. So that book is all about, get in the habit of managing people every day, learn to talk like a performance coach, create a unique ongoing dialogue with every person you manage, learn how to make expectations clear, learn how to track performance in writing, learn how to solve problems, and then how to deal with persistent performance problems, how to reward people in ways that are more likely to drive their performance. So that's It's Okay to Be the Boss. And then there's a sequel to that book, which is called The 27 Challenges Managers Face. And that's more of a drill down of applying the basics, applying the fundamentals to very specific problems. What do you do if an employee has an attitude problem? What do you do if an employee doesn't show up on time to work?
So the point I was saying is that if you're listening to this right now and you're probably a millennial driving to work right now in your hour commute, I'm telling you, you're going to practice dentistry. I've practiced 30 years and I've never once used my algebra, my calculus, my chemistry, and my almost everything I learned in dental school, I've never used one time. I mean, I would say 6 of the 8 years were totally, I mean, what does English and history and art and music have to do with a root canal? But I would tell you kids out there listening that, my God, jump the gun. That's why I felt so lucky to have Bruce Tulgan on, and go to his RainmakerThinking.com website. I would read all of his books, because I'm telling you that if you right now, you think if you go to all these fancy institutes and learn everything about TMJ and occlusion and Invisalign, you think if you can read a CBCT and bone grafting, that's going to be answers to the universe. And it's literally going to be barely a rounding error. But when you find any dentist who's crushing it, they can attract, retain, and manage employees, who thus in turn create an environment that attract and retain and manage long-term customers for life. And some of these guys only do fillings and crowns and cleaning. Some of them do fancy cosmetic and implants, but it's everybody who's successful. They got an A in HR, and that team chemistry got an A in creating long-term valuable relationships with a long-term clientele. And that's the only thing you have to get an A in. You could do the worst dentistry on earth and be successful if everybody was, if all your people were happy.
Well, I mean, as somebody with teeth who has great respect for my dentist, I'm glad that most dentists are very good at the technical aspects of their dentistry. But having said that, I agree with what you're saying, that, you know, of course, look, if you're a dentist, the likelihood is your technical skills are very good, I hope. And then where there's so much room for error is, you know, if you can't keep your hygienists, if you can't keep your office staff, and then of course that has a huge impact on the experience your patients have. And so I think, and bear in mind, you know, there's some professionals who are great at interacting with their clientele, with their patients, but they don't take the time to systematically maintain good structured dialogues with their personnel, and you're going to pay a price. What our research shows is when leaders don't maintain a regular structured dialogue with their staff members individually, that what happens is problems occur that didn't have to occur, problems get out of control that could have been solved easily, resources are squandered, people do their tasks and responsibilities the wrong way, sometimes for months or years without anybody realizing it. Low performers hide out and collect paychecks. Mediocre performers think they're high performers. High performers get frustrated and think about leaving. And then the leader, the professional, is less able to delegate more responsibility as well. So those are the costs. If you don't do the hard work of regular, structured, systematic management, those are the 8 costs, according to our research. Those are the things that go wrong. And, you know, that adds up.
One of the most interesting things in dentistry is that the prices that you're allowed to charge, like when I got out of school, a root canal was $1,000. 30 years later, it's $600 to $800. Yet the people, the staff, every time they go around the sun one time, they all put their hand out for another $1 an hour raise. So their raise is based on astrology. Come on, we've made a rotation around the sun. It's been a year now. Yet Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare, dental insurances, every unit of time that goes by, they're lowering the fees. I mean, talk to any surgeon who works on any part of the body. He or she will tell you that 10, 20 years ago, they might have got twice as much money to do a cataract, deliver a baby. I mean, so how do you manage falling healthcare prices and a staff that wants a raise every time they go around the sun?
Well, look, you know, there are economic realities in any business, and declining margins are affecting businesses in every industry. You know, in many industries, it's because of competition. In healthcare, it's more because of the insurance structure and the involvement of government. But in any business where you have constrained resources, the question becomes, what do you do with those resources? And when it comes to compensating employees, my view is that you should get employees used to the fact that performance is the way to earn more and the only way to earn more. And if your resources are constrained, if your reimbursements are declining, then you have less to work with. It means you got to get more results with less money. And that means you have to get your staff, to increase productivity and to diminish unnecessary errors and unnecessary resource squandering. So, you have to figure out what performance matters and then find ways to tie rewards directly to the performance that matters. So if it's not just that you might not get a raise, maybe you earn less if your performance goes down. If your performance improves, you earn more. And my view is that's what's truly fair, is that people should be able to earn more based if they work harder, smarter, faster, better, they should earn more. By the way, the other thing you can do is reward people in other currencies besides just money. And people really care about having some control over their own schedule. Now, obviously, if you have a dental office that has, let's say you're open from, 8 to 6 or whatever, it's no good to you to have a hygienist come in the middle of the night, right? So there's a limit to how much flexible scheduling. Likewise, people want to be able to telecommute. Well, if you're a hygienist, you can't, hey, come on over to my house and I'll clean your teeth, right? That's not going to work. So there's a limit sometimes to what you can do. But remember that people do value currencies other than money. More control over their own schedule, more control over who they have to work with. So, for example, people in your dental office may have their favorite patients. If you can let them work with their favorite patients and avoid their less favorite patients, maybe the hygienist who's late to work every day has to deal with all the really difficult patients and the ones with really bad breath who don't floss. I don't know. But, there are ways that you can leverage non-financial rewards. Training opportunities, of course, are very valuable to everyone. Task choice is very important. Maybe some people don't want to do all the grunt work. They want the more interesting tasks. The more you can leverage non-financial rewards as part of your reward system, that's another tool in your repertoire.
Well, I was going to offer my dental assistant, I thought it'd be an honor. I was going to give her my autograph, but she said she only wanted my autograph on a check. And hey,
Well,
here another question. Dentists are always asking under HR on Dental Town is the hygienist. So the hygienist does cleaning, exams, X-rays, and all that, and can do other stuff. And they always wonder if they should pay her hourly or just pay her a straight 1/3 of production commission. So every time you do $1, you get 33 cents. What are the pros and cons of paying someone hourly versus a commission in something like a hygienist in healthcare?
Well, I think a commission structure in healthcare always raises the question of, are you going to have healthcare professionals trying to upsell patients on services that they don't need? So it creates a kind of awkwardness, I think, in a healthcare relationship in particular. And my view is those are not the only two ways that you can compensate someone. Another way you could compensate someone is to create other metrics on performance to which you tie rewards directly. So, one is a bottom line measure. That's the commission structure. One is a straight hourly. And because of the nature of their work, where they spend X amount of time with each patient, presumably that works reasonably well. But I think there are other ways to reward people, which is to look at their tasks, responsibilities, and projects, and create other metrics based on productivity, quality, attitude. Maybe patient satisfaction would be a factor. Maybe patient retention would be a factor. So I think there are other measures besides commission and hourly.
So there's 125 million people in America that have a job. 125 million. What percent of those people are only alive because it's illegal to kill them?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
That was, I didn't say all my jokes are funny. That was just an attempt at a joke.
Well, when violence comes up, I'm never quite sure how to respond.
But that poor joke was a segue into when I go to Dental Town and I'm reading the threads, right? And a lot of people struggle with, they don't know when to pull the plug on an employee. I mean, when they're dealing with an employee, they think, okay, well, I got this hygienist, the patients love her, there's all these good things about her, but then there's all these bad things about her, and the dentist just beats their head up against the wall because they just can't make the call. I mean, it reminds me, who was the guy who owned the New York Yankees? He fired, the one coach and rehired him, 3 or 4, Bobby?
You're talking about George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin?
Yeah. How many times did he fire? How many times did he fire?
As a Red Sox fan, I enjoyed that circus from the outside.
So kind of like George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin. I mean, so what guidance would you give a dentist who's looking at an employee and it's like half the column is awesome and half are horrible, and you can't really draw the line? Do you pull the plug or let them keep working?
What I always tell leaders is, if you think you have a problem employee, step one, ask yourself, is it the employee or is it me? Right? Because as a leader, if you're not in a regular one-on-one dialogue with that person, are you meeting with that person for 15 minutes every day or every other day or twice a week or once a week, and spelling out expectations, giving feedback about that person's performance? And if you're not doing that, then start there and do that for a few weeks. And then, as you're spelling out expectations, make it really clear. Here are the things that you're doing really well. Here are the aspects of your performance where I need to make expectations much more clear, because obviously you're not meeting my expectations. Step one, let me really try to make those expectations clear. Let me spell it out, break it down, give you a checklist. And try that for a few weeks, making it really clear in a structured way. Not, here's what you're doing wrong, but here's how I want you to do that going forward. And here's how I'm going to keep score going forward. And then over time, if that employee's still not meeting your expectations, you want to keep score, give regular course correcting feedback. And if after some period of time that employee is just not doing it, then those problems come down to one of three things, almost always. It's either a matter of ability. In other words, that person just doesn't have the natural ability to do that task. The person doesn't have the natural talent or inclination. And so then you have two choices. If the person doesn't have the natural ability, you either change the task or you change the person. Or sometimes it's a question of skill. And what that means is the person needs more training. And so you either get that person some training or you get rid of the person. Sometimes it's a matter of the person's will to perform. They just don't want to do it. And, sometimes that's an inside problem. And don't try to be that person's therapist. It's not your job to be that person's therapist. You can't light the fire in someone else's belly. But sometimes it's the will to perform. Like, some people need a fire lit under their chair. And if you've been meeting with that person every day or every other day or twice a week and trying to help that person meet expectations, and they just don't have the will to perform, what else can I do to get you to do this? And they still won't do it. Then, so that's my approach. It's a process. And then at some point, you have to get rid of that low performer, or else you decide, okay, everything about this person that's good, maybe we're going to change some of the tasks and so that we can keep what's good. Or you say, no, the downsides are not going away. And then you got to get that person off the team. And there's 4 reasons why you have to get stubborn low performers off the team. The first reason is they get paid, and you could use that paycheck on someone else. The second reason is low performers cause problems that high performers have to fix. And that is a cost and an aggravation. The third reason is that low performers like to work with high performers, but high performers don't like to work with low performers. So if you tolerate low performers, sometimes your high performers will get frustrated and leave. And the fourth reason is that low performers send a message to everyone in your business, employees and customers alike, that you tolerate low performance. And you should not be sending that message to anyone. So I think, if you're systematic and rigorous about your approach to management, then you should be systematic and rigorous about your approach to identifying performance problems, trying to solve them through structured coaching, and then eventually you have to make a business decision about whether the downsides are sufficient. And then, my advice is, you gotta get that person off the team ultimately.
What would you say to this dentist who says, a lot of dentists I've heard say this is politically incorrect, but I've heard this said 1,000 times. Okay, I'm a man, they're all women, I can't handle it, I'm not gonna even try, I'm just gonna hire me an office manager and let her deal with all this drama and noise and whatever. Do you think an owner dentist can delegate out HR to an office manager and just focus on their root canals, fillings, and crowns, and just not be involved in HR?
Well, I think as a professional, if you make the decision that, hey, what I bring to the table here is my professional expertise and skill, and that's what I do, and I do not want to have to run my business and manage my people, then what you need is a very good prime minister. You say office manager. If you want to be the king, you'll need a very good prime minister. And then you do have to manage your chain of command. So at the very least, you have to be very good at managing that person, making it very clear what your mission is, what your objectives are, what your standards are, what your expectations are. And so, sure, you can delegate a lot of the day-to-day tactical leadership work to someone else. But then, it's sort of like if you're a 4-star general, you still got to manage someone. You manage your 3-star generals, So you have to at least manage your chain of command. And if you can get it down to just managing one person who's great at managing your team, that's a solution for some people.
And a lot of people think that the person that should have to do that is the poor sucker who married them. That, I'm sorry, but you married me. I'm a dentist, so that's your job. You're stuck. I mean, because isn't that what we were talking about while we were going to movies and on dates and making out in the back seat? Weren't you just really applying for a job as the office manager, prime minister of a dental office? So many dental offices, it doesn't matter if it's a woman dentist and it's her husband or a man dentist and his wife, so many spouses they don't find out till long after they're married that the default was now they got to go be the prime minister and run the dental office and run the business. What would you say to that person who said, I fell in love with Frank, and the next thing I know, I'm supposed to be running a damn dental office?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's something you got to navigate and negotiate in your own relationship, in your own marriage, whatever side of the equation you're on. Listen, my experience is that most families have a chain of command. Mine does, and it's not me, I'll tell you that much.
That does complicate it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're working with if you're working with family or friends, that's its own set of complications, because your working relationship is going to have an effect on your personal relationship. There's no question about it. And your personal relationship is going to have an effect on your working relationship. So it's certainly an added complication.
So, what would you say? Let's switch gears from the dentist, the owner, to the staff. One of the largest complaints that all staff have that I've heard for 30 years is, group practice is the fastest growing norm because in healthcare, the MRI machine, the CAT scan machine, the machines got so expensive that you can't buy one for each doctor. So the capital expenditures really forced group practice to share this machinery. So now the assistants, they always say the same thing. The hygienists always say the same thing. Dr. A always says go right, and Dr. B always says go left. And I feel like, religion, always has like one God. But in my office, there's like two or three, and they can't even agree that today is Thursday. And how do I navigate a minefield where there's no direct chain of command because every doctor is a god and a guru? And what would you give advice for the staff on that?
Yeah, I mean, we call this the multiple boss problem. And it's, again, you see this not just in professional services firms, and you see this in all kinds of organizations. And my advice to staff is, you got to get really good at managing your bosses. And your best bet is to look, as a leadership team, the bosses would be smart to get on the same page and to determine what are going to be the shared standards and practices and procedures. And then, okay, there are some areas where they're going to agree to disagree. So that's my advice to a leadership team. But to staff, my advice is you want to build a dialogue with each boss, and you need to basically get clear with each boss. How do you want me to do things? What are your standard operating procedures? Now, what some staff do is they go manager shopping. And, one staff person prefers to work with manager A, another staff person prefers to work with manager B, and so on. But often you have shared staff, and we call it boss managing. They have to get good at remembering how to do it for manager A and how to do it for manager B and how to do it for manager C if the managers can't get on the same page.
Well, that is I'm almost out of time. I only got a couple more minutes. You always say that most managers are stuck in a vicious cycle. What do you mean is the vicious cycle?
Yeah, I mean, what most managers are way too hands-off. They don't put enough structure and substance into their management communication up front. They don't take a walk every day and eat their vegetables when it comes to leadership. They don't have structured team meetings. They don't have regular one-on-ones with their people where they make sure everyone knows exactly what's expected of them and how we're gonna do things today. And so managers manage on autopilot. They sort of touch base with their people, but they don't drill down. And then the vicious cycle is things go wrong. So then when things go wrong, the leader has to come in and get all involved and help solve the problem and clean up the mess. And then they go right back to being hands off. So that's the vicious cycle I'm talking.
So my last question is a complicated one. I've owned my dental office for 29 years. It'll be 30 years September 2017, and I grew up with 5 sisters, and I have a little brother. And I've always said that when a woman works for me for 5 years, she kind of turns into a sister. I mean, I still have my first dental assistant. She's been there 29 years. I mean, when you work next to someone for 29 years, So the question is this. Sometimes I'm sitting at a dinner and I hear older guys like me that are, I'm 54, they might be 64. They're saying some younger woman dentist will be complaining she's having a hard time managing her team. But the older dentists will say, yeah, but you go to happy hour with them and you go to get mani-pedis with them and you went to the lake with them and you went boating and drank a case of beer. So I guess the question is this. Humans are so complicated. How if you work for me, Bruce, if you're my employee, how close can I get to you as a friend but still be an effective boss because I have to reserve the right to fire you someday. I mean, can you really fire your friend? I mean, how could I love you and want to hang out with you and go to watch football games and go to the lake and drink beer and get mani pedis and then turn around and say, Bruce, you're fired. Get out of here. I mean, so what? How do you navigate boss leadership versus friend, and when does that come to bite you?
Yeah, I mean, my view is this is a huge complication, and that people work together over a long period of time. They do form personal relationships, and that complicates the working relationship. Because, look, if you have authority in relation to someone else's career and livelihood, you have it's very important power. You have a differential power in that relationship. So, that is always going to inflect your personal relationship. And there's always a danger that you take advantage of that person at work or that person takes advantage of you. I just mean in terms of your expectations at work. So my advice is, the most clean and efficient and business-like way to handle this is to try to keep those relationships separate as much as you can. When you're at work, you got to be very business-like and professional. But it's you create this fiction because the reality is your power over that person is going to have an impact on your personal relationship, and sometimes it's going to compromise your working relationship as well. So, but look, this is a reality. And my advice to managers is this is another reason if you want to protect that friendship, be really good at managing. And that means don't hold yourself to a low standard. Don't wait for things to go wrong to manage. I mean, the thing that managers do so often is they wait till they're frustrated and angry to have important conversations with the people who work for them. And so if you're frustrated and angry, you're not at your best. And maybe they're frustrated and angry. So your best bet is, do a lot more communicating before things go wrong. And what that really means is do a lot more communicating before anything goes right, wrong, or average. Otherwise, what you have is this, you're on autopilot, and then periodically you have a crisis, and probably, if you're frustrated and angry, you behave in ways that are not your best. So the best way to avoid that is to do a lot more communicating before things go right, wrong, or average. What I always tell managers is don't wait 4 or 5 weeks until you're really out of shape and then try to go for a 10-mile run. Take a walk every day. And that's, have a good, regular, structured communication with your people. Don't wait for things to go wrong.
That is so wise because I think humans hold it in. Like a dental assistant will come in late 5 minutes, and the dentist just, and then she'll come in late again next week for 5 minutes, and this goes on. Then one day she walks in, and they just erupt and explode, and volcanic lava goes all over everywhere because they just held it in for so long that when it comes out, they're mad and angry, and they just, you know what I mean?
Exactly. So I always say solve small problems before they turn into big problems, because they usually do.
Okay, well, my last question. How many books have you written?
20, actually,
Oh my God, 20
if you
books.
count them all. A
That
lot
is
of them are very short.
so with 20 books, she just graduated from dental school 2 months ago. What would be the first book she should read if she's got to manage and be a leadership in a dental office? She's 25. She just walked out of 8 years of math and physics. What would be, of your 20 books, what would be the first one?
The one I would recommend starting with is It's Okay to Be the Boss.
Perfect. Hey, seriously, Bruce, and to all of my homies listening out there, I'm telling you, I'll tell you a million times, get an A in people, get an A in HR. You take way too many classes in root canals, fillings, and crowns. I'm telling you, I know you think that's important when you're 25 and under, and it is important. But by and large, you do that kind of too well to begin with. It's the HR that's going to cause all your problems, all your nightmares, all your lawsuits. You know, happy patients that trust you don't sue you. They just tell you why they're upset, and you fix that. I mean, every malpractice attorney I've ever talked to said that the patient couldn't talk to the doctor, they didn't trust the doctor. So, I mean, so your whole life, if you can figure out people, if you can get an A in HR, if you can figure out your staff, then figure out your people, just concentrate on this, because all that algebra, geometry, trigonometry bullshit was a complete waste of time. So I'd start reading Bruce's 20 books and just keep reading them until you say, okay, I got this. And you need to get that better than a root canal. Bruce, it was such an honor that you spent an hour with me and my homies today. I'm sure they got a lot out of it.
It's my honor. It's a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much for including me.
I'm just sad that my son Ryan heard all this, and now he's going to use this HR information against me. All right, Bruce, have a great day.